All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the January National Heritage Area Best Practices Zoom meeting. We haven't been a phone call for quite a while, so I finally decided to rename it. So now that we are doing our Zoom meetings, today's topic is going to be digital storytelling. We're going to be hearing from 3 different national heritage areas. Bob Sadler from MotorCities National Heritage Area is going to talk about the story of the week and a couple other digital storytelling projects that they are working on. And Desiree Demski-Hamelin is going to be talking about heritage stories, and she is from Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. And I, Heather Feezor, who is program manager for the Abraham Lincoln National Heritage Area, will be talking about our project, Looking for Lincoln Stories. I will remind everyone to please mute themselves on the Zoom so we have as little background noise as possible. And as a reminder, this is being recorded. So Bob, and one more thing, we are holding questions till all 3 of us have finished speaking. So if you have a question, if you don't want to forget it, you can put it in the chat and we'll make sure we answer it. But we will open it up for questions after all 3 of us have finished presenting. So Bob, would you like to start?
Yes, I will. I'm just pulling up my PowerPoint. I'll be set up in just a second. There we go. Can everybody see that? Okay. Well, thanks a lot, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you on this snowy January afternoon in Michigan. I am Bob Sadler. I'm Communications Manager for MotorCities National Heritage Area. We're based in Detroit. I am coming to you live from Dearborn, the home of Henry Ford. And we've been doing digital storytelling at MotorCities for quite a while. In fact, long before my 5 years at MotorCities. But first and foremost, and what was mentioned in the email promoting this call was our story of the week, which has been part of MotorCities now for almost 15 years. So it was we were early adapters to the digital storytelling realm. But we also have a number of things on our website that I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to do a PowerPoint first, and then I'm going to go to my website and kind of walk through a few things quickly, just to give you an overview of some of the things we do. Starting with Story of the Week, and then also covering Making Tracks, which started out originally as a joint project between ourselves and the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And Making Tracks is devoted to the African American experience in the automotive industry. The Southwest Detroit Auto Heritage Guide, which is another part of our website, devoted to a specific set of neighborhoods in Detroit that played a key role in the auto industry. Many Voices, One Story, which is about our DEI efforts and telling automotive stories and stories of people in the context of showcasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And finally, MotorCities on the Road, which was an offshoot of our Speakers Bureau, which we launched literally just before the pandemic, and found that all these wonderful speaking engagements at public libraries and things all started to wither on the vine due to the pandemic. And so we moved it virtual and created a program series that is still very robust and vibrant to this day. And I will also note, we do have a weekly e-newsletter using Constant Contact. It's kind of a fun play on words, You Auto Know. And it comes out every Wednesday, and we have about 6,000 email addresses that receive that every week. And it's very easy to sign up for as well. So we'll start with Story of the Week. And like I said, that dates back about 15 years. It actually started in more traditional media, started out as a weekly article that we distributed to a specific local newspaper. And it wasn't weekly. It was kind of on an as as needed. I think it was monthly, maybe, and then it had a little more frequency. Then we lost the relationship with that paper and started it up with another paper. And after that, it actually then migrated to our website and became a weekly fixture there. It was till about 7 or 8 years ago that it became the foundation of that weekly e-newsletter. And still to this day is kind of the main piece of our weekly e-newsletter, although we also cover, Motor Cities news. We cover events and weekly things taking place at our attraction partners, and also feature a specific item that took place during the week in automotive history. So the e-newsletter has a wide variety of content, but the story of the week is still the franchise. And if you ever had a chance to look at our Google Analytics, you would see a big spike every Wednesday, which relates to the content that's presented in our story of the week. The way the mechanism by which we do it, we've had a number of authors over the years. We have an author that we've been working with who is our primary researcher for these programs, and does the research and drafts the articles. And then every week I take and edit those and add the photos, post them on the website. They get posted in our e-news, and then they also go up on our social media on a weekly basis. So that's kind of now I'm going to go through all these things first, and then I'm going to walk through the website and show you some examples of some of these. Making Tracks, as I mentioned, started as its own website because it was a joint project. And then over time, we actually merged it into our MotorCities.org website. And as I noted, it chronicles the history of African Americans in the auto industry. And there's educational content in terms of materials that can be used by educators. There are also a number of videos on that site. So it goes, way beyond photos and written content. The Southwest Detroit Auto Heritage Guide is relatively new for us. It was added to the website in 2020, and it focuses, as I mentioned, specifically on some neighborhoods in Southwest Detroit, which is now an area that has become very diverse, very Hispanic-oriented neighborhood, but also had a lot of automotive manufacturing in that long history there. Many Voices, One Story. We added this in 2021 as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And we do entries to this page pretty much monthly. We do a lot around, February for Black History Month, March is Women's History Month. We also, add content over the course of the year. As it relates, we have an Excel sheet calendar that has all kinds of different featured months. And so we've added things on people with disabilities, Autism Awareness Month, different ethnicities, French heritage, Arab American heritage, Caribbean area heritage. So there's a wide variety of content on that page as well. And we're in the process of kind of reorganizing it a little bit on the website so that it's going to be easier to navigate down the road. Motor Cities on the Road, as I mentioned earlier, it started as an offshoot of our Speakers Bureau. During the pandemic, it was called Motor Cities at Home initially, because everyone was at home and working from home. We started off with a number of Zoom programs. We actually broadcast them live on Facebook Live. And then after the programs are completed, they all have life on the Motor Cities on the Road webpage, as well as on our YouTube channel. And so we just recently, the latter part of 2022, rebranded Motor Cities at Home and are now calling it Motor Cities on the Road, which is giving us a little more flexibility for the future to not only continue to do them via Zoom, but also to mix in-person programs, and probably will continue to broadcast them, so they'll be hybrid programs. So in addition, our digital storytelling also takes place very heavily on our web social media portals, including Facebook, which is by far and away our biggest. Our demographics, automotive history, we definitely skew, 40 plus. So Facebook is still very much our primary social media outlet, and we have over 18,000 followers there. So it's a great way to reach a lot of people. And one thing that we did do was in my first year on the job throughout 2018, I took some content that I had from previous positions, merged it with some research that I inherited when I got to MotorCities, and I was able to create a This Day in Auto Heritage hashtag and put together content that has items from automotive history, primarily Michigan, but not just Michigan, but certainly American automotive history, and put that out almost on a daily basis. Probably 250 or more of those posts go out annually, and also using hashtags when we feature content from our partners, attractions, events coming up, exhibits and things, using the hashtag Explore Motor Cities. So I think I still have a few minutes here. Let me just run through a few things on our website so you can get some examples of some of the things that we do. Okay, so this is our YouTube channel, and you can see we have Making Tracks content. We have some Motor Cities on the Road programs. We have some programs for our videos from Many Voices, One Story. So you can kind of get a feel for some of the true multimedia content in terms of video on our YouTube channel, which has grown significantly. And then on our website, got to show you the franchise, which is Story of the Week. And we cover lots of different topics. For example, yesterday's story was about the early days of Ford Motor Company dealerships. So we have old, wonderful photos of cars in old dealerships, old ads. And again, all this content is researched by a local historian, and he sends me his research in a draft form and sends me the photos, and then I edit and put those into these cool, we have, we talk about products, we talk about, this is about Chevrolet's 1970 models. So there's a lot of good history, a lot of retro visuals, old advertising. As you can imagine, a lot of car enthusiasts eat this content up. And our archive currently goes back all the way to 2014. So we've got almost 10 years of content of Stories of the Week on the website. Whenever I have interns, I try to add more archival content to that section. And last but not least, I'll show you some examples from the Facebook. Every day we have This Day in Auto Heritage. Today is an interesting one. It's the premiere of The Dukes of Hazzard on CBS, and the big star of the show, the 1969 Dodge Charger known as the General Lee. So kind of interesting automotive history we've got. And of course we do also, this shows you how we cross-pollinate how the content from Story of the Week goes on the Facebook page weekly. So there's the Facebook post about yesterday's story about the Ford dealerships. Earlier in the week, we had Albert Erskine, who was the CEO of Studebaker, who kind of went down in flames. But there's content pretty much on a daily basis as it relates to automotive and labor history. So that pretty much is kind of a quick thumbnail of some of the digital content and storytelling that we do. And like I said, it does really resonate with the people that are into automotive history.
Well, thanks, Bob. It is now time for Desiree to share. Can you get your PowerPoint? Oh, there you are. You're already on top of it.
Okay, great. Let's see here. So good afternoon. I'm Desiree Demski-Hamelin, Deputy Director of Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. I'd like to thank you, Heather, for reaching out to us to showcase one of our digital storytelling initiatives, Heritage Stories, and for each of you for joining us today. We're excited for this opportunity to share our work with all of you. So before we dive in, for any of those of you who are new to heritage areas or may not know where Freedom's Way is because its name doesn't necessarily give you a good idea, we are located up here in the Northeast region. And we were designated as a National Heritage Area in 2009, and we are comprised of 45 individual towns and cities in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, encompassing roughly 1,000 square miles of land. We work closely with Minuteman National Historical Park in the towns of Concord, Lincoln, and Lexington. And our three interpretive themes are A Mosaic of Subtle Beauty, Inventing the New England Community, and Revolutionary Ideas, Visionaries, and Experimenters. And so that actually ties most closely with the digital storytelling initiative that we'll be talking about today. So let's jump in. So Heritage Stories, Visionaries, and Experimenters is a multi-year project of the Freedom's Way National Heritage Area that uses digital media to share the stories of the visionaries and experimenters that lived within its boundaries with the widest audience possible. Each story provides insight into the lives of individuals who were born or lived within the Freedom's Way National Heritage Area and were shaped by their time here. These individuals who have made a difference and have been at the forefront of social, intellectual, and cultural innovations that relate to new things or ideas in the world that the world, or at least Americans, had never seen before, proving enormously influential on American culture making in the Freedom's Way, and making Freedom's Way a region of firsts in American invention, thought, and design. So how did this project come about? Well, as we prepared for the Women's Suffrage Centennial, back in, as we were preparing in 2019, we decided to commemorate this historic milestone with a year-long thematic focus on the people, places, objects from throughout the heritage area that are associated with stories of related to the 19th Amendment, civics, and women's history more broadly. So together with our partners, we created and implemented a diverse portfolio of projects, which included an ebook featuring the stories of more than 70 notable women. We had a 100-day social media campaign. And then we also produced these 8 Heritage Stories videos. And so as we developed this heritage area-wide presentation and various interpretive experiences, we designed them to engage new audiences to explore the region and the region's role in this chapter of the American story. So for Heritage Story specifically, we formed a team and each member had specialized skills that were needed for the project. So we had someone who is really great at doing the research and digging to really craft these stories. Of course, then generating the actual script itself. We needed people strong with editing. We had a graphic designer work with us, someone who had video editing skills, and we also worked with a recording and sound engineer, and of course, our vocal talent. So with all of that in place, we identified who we were going to profile, and we got to work. And so to help illustrate what these final products are, I'm going to show just the first few minutes of the Heritage Stories video that we developed for Ellen Swallow Richards. And she was a chemist, professor, and social reformer who was born in Dunstable, Massachusetts, and she grew up in the nearby communities of Westford and Littleton, and these are all towns within Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. So just a moment, and I'm going to swap my screen, and here we are. Can you hear? Okay.
Welcome to Heritage Stories, Visionaries and Experimenters, created by the Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. Each story introduces an inspiring individual whose actions, discoveries, and inventions have shaped social, intellectual, and cultural innovation in Freedom's Way in America, changing the way in which Americans viewed the world. They made a difference. I'm your narrator, Liz Bloom, and today's story is Ellen Henrietta Swallow Richards, chemist, professor, and social reformer. When Ellen Swallow Richards, one of the most influential chemistry minds of the late 19th century, found herself the first female student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she had to calm her doubters by offering not just her scientific knowledge, but her sewing skills. Mending the clothes of her male classmates made her intellect less threatening, a strategy she felt the need to employ at a school that at the time prioritized gender over genius. Carefully avoiding roiling the waters, as she put it, Richard's exceptional intelligence helped open the door for women's education. Richard's practical application of science impacted many things that we take for granted: clean drinking water, sanitation, school lunches. We can thank Ellen Richards for them all. She tackled water pollution, and the field of sanitary engineering was born. She analyzed nutrition in meals and initiated the first school lunch program in the nation. She sought science training for women and established the Women's Laboratory at MIT. She advocated for improved conditions in the home and pioneered the field of home economics. She valued college for women and co-founded the Association of Collegiate Alumni, now the American Association of University Women.
Okay, so that gives you just a taste of what these heritage stories are. They are all available on our YouTube channel as well as our website. And I'll share those links in the chat later, should you be interested in learning more. So how has Heritage Stories evolved for us over time? Well, as I mentioned, we ultimately produced 8 of these videos commemorating the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment over the course of 2020. And at the end of 2020, we then embarked on this very large scale rebranding and web redesign, complete overhaul of our website. And really that was inspired by the need to find a way to be able to share these incredible stories of the heritage area in a compelling and engaging way online. So all of our heritage stories, as well as our other storytelling initiatives, are fully integrated into the new website, which was inspired by the idea of an online museum through which we can digitally curate the region. And, that's really because Freedom's Way, again, we don't have one specific spot as some heritage areas do to really focus our work. We've got, again, 45 very diverse communities that span multiple states, multiple counties. We've got urban, exurban, suburban, rural. We've got quite a bit of diversity here, but ultimately we have these themes that we're able to use to thread and tie these different communities together. And so for us, having a digital platform through which to do that is the way that we've found most effective for us. And so currently we have a number of other digital storytelling initiatives that are active. Every month in our e-newsletter, we do what's called a closer look, and we pick whether it's a person, a place, it could be an event, but oftentimes it ties into the NPS service-wide theme that we tend to focus our e-newsletter, our monthly e-newsletter around. And it's really just doing that deeper dive on, like, you know, why is this, why is this street, you know, where did this name come from that you see all over the place? Like, really, what is the story behind that person? And so we found that those are really enjoyed by our readership. So those, again, they are highlighted in our newsletters, but they ultimately are within the database on the website, through which people can always find and explore other related stories. We've also, earlier in 2022, we announced our Revolutionary Stories initiative, which is a semi-quincentennial project up here in Massachusetts, as you may be aware. And on April 19th, 1775, the beginning of the American Revolution began. So while others are preparing for 2026, we've got to get a jump on it in 2025, because the story starts here for us then. So we are doing a lot of work to share a whole diversity of stories related to the people who were here during that time and took part in those events. And again, all of that is integrated into our website. And we will continue with heritage stories and refine these videos, whether they need to be shorter. You know, there are all sorts of different things we're considering to ultimately be able to produce them efficiently and make sure that they get out to as wide of an audience as possible. So with the few minutes left, so a couple of challenges that we've encountered, you know, dealing with historical topics and especially with women, or if we're looking at other people who have not necessarily been actively part of, you know, the storytelling, we find that there's less, you know, there are fewer photographs that are just like widely available online through which to represent these stories with in the way that we've crafted these videos. So sometimes we'd have to think really creatively and maybe stage something that could fill a space in the video. So that's, you know, on the top of our mind too, especially as we look at the Revolutionary War period and, you know, what can we use for visual representation from that. Yes, so I think that's it. Was that good on time, Heather? We're good.
You're doing great, Desiree. So
Great.
are you good?
Yes, we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to share now, and then we will open it up for questions. I'm actually going to just share my screen here. Just a second. It was up. All right. Can you guys see that okay? Yes. Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Heather Feezor, and I'm going to be talking about a project called Looking for Lincoln Stories. And what Looking for Lincoln Stories is a very similar to Heritage Stories. And I really should start by saying that this idea for this project was inspired by Freedom's Way sharing at a different presentation a couple years ago about heritage stories. And so I was like, how could we recreate this in our heritage area? And it was about the time that we were looking to expand the stories we were telling and diversify them to tell more diverse stories. And for those of you who don't know, the Abraham Lincoln National Heritage Area is 43 counties. We have 29 designated communities, and we cover roughly about half the state of Illinois. And we have lots of different sites that tell the story of Lincoln, but we really wanted to tell stories to a broader audience, especially during the era of COVID. We wanted to develop some stuff that could be used digitally. And so from that, Looking for Lincoln Stories was launched. And I'm going to walk you through the website a little bit and talk to you about it, and then we'll open it up for questions. So as you can see on the screen, it is a video and podcast series about people, events, and places connected to Abraham Lincoln's life and times. and we tell real live events that paint a picture of the vibrant history of the National Heritage Area. And largely due to the number of images that we need to create them, we have actually done the majority of our stories in podcast format because we're dealing with the life and times of Abraham Lincoln. Photography is brand new, and many of the stories that we share honestly do not have hardly any photos, if any, that we can use. So I sympathize with Desiree's need to search for images because that is a ever-present challenge. Oh, well, that's sad. It's not available. So we have 3 podcasts, and I'm not sure why they're not showing up on Spotify right now, but that we have actually completed 4, actually. African Americans in Lincoln Springfield. We have Susan Richardson, A Story of Slavery and Freedom in Illinois. New Philadelphia, an African American community on the Illinois frontier. And the 1875 Emancipation Celebration, A Grand Old Story Barbecue in Atlanta, Illinois. And the one I'm going to focus on today is this one. This is actually a video and a podcast that I am actually going to share for a clip from the video here in a minute. So this story we knew about for years and years and years, and it's the story of this small rural community in central Illinois that if you go there today, you could drive through the town and you would barely know you were there. It is still a small rural community, but they hosted this large event in 1875 that brought African Americans from literally throughout central Illinois to this small town because they were having an emancipation celebration event to celebrate when the Emancipation Proclamation was first announced by President Lincoln. And we had known about the story for many, many years, but there was just never really a good way to tell it. Where it actually took place is literally a cow pasture. There's nothing there. The town has a museum, and there was this small little exhibit panel about it in their museum. And they have one artifact, which is like the poster that was put up to announce the event. But they didn't really have a great way to tell the story beyond the people that stepped into the museum. And it was something they'd always wanted to tell. So this happened in 1875. And I'm like, okay, this would be a good time to tell the story. There's more pictures. But pictures were actually one of the biggest challenges of pulling this off because while there were quite a bit of pictures, when you do a video that's 8 minutes long, you need a lot of images to fill the space. So that was one of our greatest challenges with this project. But our idea was to share the story with a much broader audience than our community of Atlanta could do. And so very similar to Heritage Stories, we use image and we use sound to bring the story to life. And I'm going to show you a few clips of the video, and then I will talk more about our podcast. Can you guys hear the sound? Sound? No? Yes?
September 22nd, 1875 was a big day for the Logan County. According to newspaper accounts of the time, footsteps were heard on the walks before daylight and kept up until a late hour next night. Visitors began to hold. More than 1,000 people filled up the town's fairgrounds. Cannon were fired for the first thing in the morning to alert everyone that the day that they had been waiting for had arrived. The people had gathered for a grand old-style barbecue with lots of good food, prominent speakers, music, and dancing. But the cause for the celebration is something we see, half of them by acclamation, or is universally extolled and bonded for hundreds of years in the land of the free. Yet, proclamation was that the young nation had ever seen.
Okay. Could you guys hear that okay? Okay. So I need to go back to the screen. So that was a clip of our video, but as I have shared, we had a really hard time coming up with images. We had some really great stories that we wanted to share. So we developed some podcasts And so this podcast is actually about a African-American community on the Illinois frontier. And our next video is going to be about New Philadelphia, and it would have been finished except in the most recent legislation, it was just designated as a National Historic Site. So we had to go back in and redo the narration, and we should be launching it in early February live. So we'll have another documentary video. But we started as a podcast originally just to get the story out there. And then we did one on the Susan Richardson story, which is a story about a young woman in Illinois who basically self-emancipated herself as she sought freedom in another part of the state. And it's a very interesting story. And it was one I really wanted to tell in a visual way, but literally there were not enough images to do it. And then the other story is about African Americans in Lincoln Springfield. And there were 4 African men that Lincoln had relationships with, that we had researched and could document that they either worked with Mr. Lincoln or acquainted with him. And one of them was his bootmaker, one of him was his neighbor, just different individuals who had interacted with Lincoln. And so this was one of our ways that we could tell the stories of Abraham Lincoln's time and with a much broader audience in a digital way that can then be used by our communities, as well as all of the videos that we are creating are put on our website. And really our biggest challenge, I would say, with this project is images and sometimes finding narrators. So similar to Heritage Stories, we have myself that works on this project, we have a contractor, we have the community works with us on getting the research and the information. And then I have a script writer that drafts it into a script. And then we work with a narrator, usually from someone from our local theater area has been traditionally who we have used. And so that is kind of how we've been telling our story. We are continuing to expand it. We have some other stories in the pipeline, but they do take quite a bit of time from conception to actually being able to be published. So I don't want to take too much time so people have time for questions. So without any further ado, does anyone have any other questions for me or Desiree or Bob? You could ask all 3 of us individually a question. Does anyone have any questions? I know I have one for Bob real quick to kick us off. What do you have parameters for story of the week? Like, does it just have to connect in some way to auto history, or do you guys have like a set, like it has to fit within like this criteria, I guess is my question.
It's pretty broad. I don't think we don't really, I mean, as long as it's automotive or labor history, it's not necessarily geographically limited to the 16 counties of Michigan that we have as our National Heritage Area. In many ways, we cover stories that are, national in scope. So, we're really not limited there. So yeah, as long as it's automotive and labor, we've covered, both way back history as well as, very in the now history. We've done stories about, current designers, people who work in the automotive industry, in design. Especially lately, we've focused on some diverse stories of, some African Americans and women that are, trailblazing in the automotive design field. And, some of those we have, videos that are found on our Many Voices, One Story page. So they have life beyond just story of the week. They cross onto the Many Voices page. They're on our YouTube page. You can actually watch, Brian Yap, who's on this call, has done a lot of the interviews for the Many Voices, One Stories videos that go on the site. And, so we are constantly, adding new content and, like I said, it's pretty broad.
Okay, so we have a question for all. Oh, I think Judith has a question. So Judith, we'll have you ask your question first, and
Okay.
then I'll take
Okay.
Alex's question.
Okay, I think Bob answered it for me from MotorCities, but I'm curious about it. They're beautiful projects, all of them. It's really inspiring. Thank you. I'm just wondering if people tend to do only sort of far back stories, or how much of sort of contemporary storytelling are people doing?
Well, I will answer for Looking for Lincoln, and then I will hand it over to Desiree. But so we focus our entire scope of our story is Abraham Lincoln's life and times. MotorCities is wonderful because they can go into to now. So no, we mostly focus on when Abraham Lincoln was alive. You will notice that the Emancipation Celebration was in 1875, which is after, and I thought about it, but it was so closely connected to Abraham Lincoln. So yes, so I would say we stray a little bit, but mostly we are dealing with Abraham Lincoln's lifetime for us, because that is what our legislation mostly focuses on. But we're not strictly tied to, as you can tell by the topics, we're not strictly tied to talking about Abraham Lincoln. We're of course trying to diversify other stories that happened at the time. So Desiree, do you want to?
All of the heritage story videos that we did are definitely on historical figures who have since passed. We do our third interpretive theme again, thinking about the revolutionary ideas, and we still have a lot of incredible people alive in the heritage area now who have done fascinating work on the global scale, and so we are aware of that, and we have toyed with the idea of what's an appropriate way, how do we tell those stories, or you don't want to just wait until they're gone. But we have not done that in terms of heritage stories and that type of production at this point. But I would say that our closer look stories that are in the e-newsletters, sometimes those are about active like an active farm, for example. We wrote one on that has actually been within the same family and farmed and continues to be farmed for over 3 centuries. So there are ways that we definitely do tell stories that bring the past into the present. But again, with individuals, it's been a little trickier, and we haven't gone there yet.
Thank you.
Okay, Desiree, since you just talked, I'm going to have you take the next one. So Bob, this is for you and me and Desiree, but I'll have Desiree start. So this is from Alex at Maritime National Heritage Area, or Maritime Washington National Heritage Area. All right, so this is, do we compensate writers or contributors to the story? And if so, how do you determine an appropriate amount?
So for our particular team, at that point, we had 2 staff members, Patrice and myself, who did, more of the editing, the facilitating, all of that, the admin work there and pulling it together. So we are paid. We worked with 2 paid consultants, our researcher, script writer, really she served as the project manager, but she's served as a consultant for a number of years for the organization. Our graphic designer works on a consulting basis. And then the sound engineer did all of the work pro bono. He was new to learning about the heritage area, but was really fascinated by our work, and was his own side projects was really diving into the world of podcasts. So he was really happy to work with us to do that. And for us, that was great because it was an in-kind contribution of his services that we were able to use for our matching requirement. And the same would go for any of our community partners who we reached out to for assistance with developing the stories, or maybe sharing images from their collections. They were all willing to do that, again, pro bono or in-kind contributions of services. So for us, it was a mix, but we did not actively seek any new, specific person that would come in and kind of do all of this work for us.
Bob?
Yeah, in terms of story of the week, the person that I mentioned and alluded to earlier who researches and drafts articles and then also provides images, that is a contracted position. They get paid, per article, and basically our relationship with him goes, well beyond a decade of working with him. He actually charges us an amount, and then he considers half of it a donation. So we pay him basically half of what his going rate, I guess you could say, would be, and he considers the other half a donation. So he's that. And then in terms of some of the other, we don't really, that's the only contractor that in terms of the other video content that we've put together, MotorCities on the Road, we do it via Zoom, and I serve as kind of the anchor host, and we solicit guests and have them do their presentations for that. And then for Many Voices, One Story, and some of the other video content that we've put together for making tracks, and our multi-talented deputy director on this call, Brian Yap, does a lot of that production himself, and we have purchased equipment to facilitate that and make that possible. But
still waiting on my check, Bob. So where do I sign up for that? Wait.
Yeah, I mean, at different times, all three of us, in terms of myself, Brian, and Sean Palmaville-Size, our executive director, have all done interviews and content supporting the Many Voices, One Stories, the Many Voices, One Story initiative, and have all also been active in MotorCities on the Road, and so we all kind of multitask, and are multiple threats, I guess you could say.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. And I would add that for Looking for Lincoln, I do a big chunk of the work for Looking for Lincoln Stories. I track, if we're doing an image, like I track down the majority of the images. I work with the communities. I collect the research. We do contract with a scriptwriter to draft the scripts, and he has been in the Lincoln world for a while. And literally, we had an idea, and I was trying to think of someone. I emailed him, and he sent me a quote of what he would do it for, and it's we pay him per episode, and then we pay the Springfield theater community a very reasonable, I think it's like $150 per them sitting down for narration, and I do the narration. We have a really fancy microphone that Looking for Lincoln has bought for other things that we do, and so I just use that. And then we have a wonderful contractor who's practically a staff member who takes it all, the audio, he adds in the sound effects and the background music and puts all together, and then produces this wonderful either podcast or video. So mostly it's a full-time staff member, a contractor, and our by episode narrator and scriptwriter. So the scriptwriter has stayed consistently the same, but we've varied the narrators. And I will say that one thing the committee that worked on this when we got started were very adamant about, since we were doing African-American stories, was that we have African-American narrators. And one thing I will say is that not anybody can just talk into a microphone and have it sound interesting. I wish that were true. And one of the reasons we went with people who work in our local community theater is that they can add their use to working with intonation and making things sound interesting, because the very first time we recorded something, it sounded terrible. Like, we can't use this. It was wonderful. They donated their time, but we couldn't use it. So we learned that you needed to use somebody who's used to presenting, who's used to talking, because it just makes all the difference in the world when you're doing something. And thankfully, we have a very robust group of professional and semi-professional community theater folks in our area who do that. So
Heather, May I ask a deeper dive question on the putting together the videos, and you mentioned the need for images. How do you negotiate that? Are the images given sort of pro bono or in kind, or
Okay.
you have to sort of come up with a fee?
The
I'll just say we
Library
have to
of
come up with a
Congress
fee.
is my friend, Brian.
Oh, okay.
So the Library of Congress has a massive database, and so does the National Archives is not as deep. But the Library of Congress has tons of images, and most of them you can use for free. We also have a really great relationship with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. And when I've been working on this project, I have emailed their someone in their library system, and they have let us use the images for free as long as we credit them. So at the end of every show we've done, whether it's a podcast or like on our website, we even list where we get all the pictures and stuff. We list all of that. You would be amazed what public libraries there are in the world that have digital collections. One of the biggest challenge for images we had with the Atlanta story was all the pictures of the fairgrounds we had in Atlanta did not have any African Americans. So we were telling a story about an event, but we didn't have any pictures. So all of the images, if you watched it, of African Americans that are used in the video are from Austin, Texas, and Charleston, South Carolina. And there's a couple, I think, from DC that we got from the Library of Congress that were from similar emancipation celebration events, same time period and everything, just we did not have them for Atlanta. And I went to Atlanta and they said, well, we have some, but I mean, that is one of the biggest challenges. So traditionally, we have not paid, although we did recently get an iStock subscription because we were having issues with finding free pictures. So we get so many free, they're in iStock to supplement what we can find. But literally, if you're going to start a project like this, the Library of Congress, learn how to use their photo database and Google anything, like you type it in there. Also, Google. So that's how I even found the stuff in Austin, Texas, was I was Googling Emancipation Day celebrations and like tracking down where they were. And then there was one picture once we got to use for free. Yeah. Somebody say something. So that's kind of what I would say. Like you have to, that's probably what takes the most time in this project is finding the pictures. So I'm kind of jealous of the fact you have a researcher that kind of does research for your stories, Brian.
Well, no, that's why I bring it up. You know, you were talking earlier about there are certainly pros and cons to us serving a living industry, but part of that is because this living industry has living archives and living media oversight people who are, you know, so we don't get pictures of 1972 Chevys just for the fun of it, because GM is still going, wait a minute, now that's my photo. And Bob can attest to the fact that even if you go beyond that, there are other photographers and researchers who, on occasion, if we post something, they'll say, wait a minute, I think I took that photo, where's my credit or whatever. So it can be, you know, a gift and a curse. And I know when you're making a video like that, very lengthy video that you need all those images for, because you don't have the video, like the talking head part of it, that it can, you know, can stack up a lot of images. And we've had to, we've got these repositories who are great, but they also deserve to be paid for their images too. So we end up, you know.
Well,
paying.
and yeah, I would definitely say we have definitely had some money in the budget to pay for some pictures if we needed to. But so far, everybody that we have used, if you read their credits, allowed you, if you were using, this is like not making us any money. So, you know, we're a nonprofit. And so if you fit into the right category and it's an educational purpose, they have allowed us to use the pictures for free. So that has been a huge benefit for Looking for Lincoln. So other questions? I'm looking in the chat.
Heather, I have one for you.
Oh.
Have you, forgive me, I'm unclear how long the podcast element has been up, or if you launched both the videos and the podcast at the same time. But I'm curious if you're finding that one tends to have a larger following than the other?
You know, that is interesting. I would have to look at our digital like video numbers versus probably our video has gotten more hits than our podcasts. One of the challenges we have with our podcast is literally last year it was just getting them out. And this year we were going to do more promotion on them. It hasn't happened yet. What I can tell you is the one podcast that has done best of all the ones we've done. It's because the New Philadelphia Association, who was very supportive of our project because they'd never had a podcast done and they cannot wait for the video to be finished. They shared it and then it got shared and it just went crazy. But that was really them pushing it out and people who were very connected to that site, listening to the narration and everything. And I will tell you that when we update the video, we are updating the narration because it ends and it says that it's in the process of being developed. And there were a couple other things that the association wanted us to update. So that one will be relaunched again in February when we launch the video. But that one has done the best. And I imagine that video will go really well too, because it's a very grassroots organization that's very proud of their story. And the people who are into the story, like listen, like it's so that story, if you can get a built-in audience, and the more podcasts we do, we will build a more audience. We had a meeting with one of our partners and they said, oh, I've listened to all of your podcasts on my way to work. And I'm like, there's only 4. So I'm not, and they're not terribly long. I think they're like 8 minutes on average length. They're not terribly long. And they're not like a traditional podcast where there's conversation. It's literally narration and a beautiful story booked end with someone explaining what it is at the beginning and end. So, and it has worked. People who've listened to it really like it. But it was a learning curve for me because I'd never done podcasts. I've never done any of this. And so it's been a fun journey. And then once you have the content, you can then use it in so many different ways. Like we're working on developing an exhibit and some of that digital content will get worked into the exhibit because you can just listen to it on your phone. So other questions? We are almost out of time. So. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to today's call. There are links in the chat. I haven't put ours in there, but there are links to the chat to other podcasts and digital history projects that have been shared if you'd like to save that. But without any further ado, I'd like to thank you for tuning in today's call and join us next month. Bye.